So I've been doing aviation all my life and flying all my life. I started in Miami, doing everything from Equatorianos and Avianca and crashes in South America to the older airlines. Most of you don't know because you're too young. Eastern, TWA, Pan Am. On the panel with me today is Justin Green and Brian, and you know both of those. I'll let them each introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll try to tie our discussion into the flat panel somewhat with some great stories. I'm sitting on this end as the only defense attorney, so I'm not so outnumbered. But welcome to our panel, and thank you for all coming on a Friday.
So I'm Brian Lawler. I do have a last name. Thanks, Mike.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave it off.
Well, that's okay. I do have one. Doesn't matter whether you acknowledge it or not. I've been doing aviation law for, I guess, about 16 years. Consider some folks in this room to be mentors, and some people I learned a lot from. I think the reason I'm here now is to discuss the interplay between the military investigation and any civil litigation. So I just retired in August out of the Marine Corps after 28 years, 11 active and 17 in the reserve component. And while I was in the reserve component, I was activated on 6 occasions to do crash investigations. So I've done 6 of those in the last, I guess since 04 was the first one I did. 3 couple mid-airs. Some of you may know the story about an F-18 that the Marine Corps decided to park into a house in San Diego and kill 4 civilians. That was number 1. I've actually given that presentation a few times. I was on that investigative team, and I've been the senior, and in some cases the sole investigator on a couple of occasions. Most recently, last July, I was activated to do the investigation, be the lead on a Marine Corps KC-130 that came apart in flight at 20,000 feet and ended up in a soybean field in a wreckage pattern about 8 miles, about 3 miles. So that was still working that one. So anyway, in addition to my active duty crash investigation experience, it's dovetailed into an aviation law practice. So exclusively represent plaintiffs. I've been doing so for, like I said, about 16 years. So, but most relevantly, I'm here to talk about the military investigative aspect. So, and over to one of my mentors and good friends, Mr. Green.
I'm way too young to be his mentor, so.
He's not the best looking guy around.
We found that out yesterday. So I'm Justin Green. I'm a partner at Grindland Grindler. Before I went to law school, I was a Marine Corps pilot. And when you're a pilot in the Marine Corps, they give you secondary jobs. So my first secondary job was the urinalysis officer. And I went to school. By the way, they don't call you the urinalysis officer, they call you the piss officer. So I went to school for a week, and then for about a year, until somebody juniors checked into the squadron and got this job, I was the piss officer. But then after I was the piss officer, I became the aviation safety officer for the squadron. I went to Naval Postgraduate School, and then for a couple of years I was an ASO, and I was on a couple of major investigations. And I remember getting letters from lawyers about crashes that the squadron had well before I came to the squadron. I remember this guy from Mendes Mount used to write me all the time looking for something that I didn't have. And so I have the perspective of not just handling cases involving military crashes, but when I was in the military, responding to some of the desperate pleas for evidence from litigants. So hopefully we'll talk about some of that experience.
And I should say, Brian Walner deployed very commendably to deploy.
I'm aware of that. I was there.
And I wanted the panel to know that something that these guys did, I did not do, which is amazing. Thank you guys for your service. The fact pattern you saw had some interesting twist into it. The Air Force aircraft, which as you've read through it, was also highly classified. It's designed to be a spec ops. It's based on the Pilatus. They have a lot of base in our area down out of Hurlburt, and it's a highly sensitive piece of equipment, but it's modified. So how does that affect And the fact that we've had an Air Force asset go down on a civilian runway, which, as you saw, resulted in closing the field under the auspices of the Air Force. How does that affect planes for these passengers? How does that change anything? The fact that there was a collision between two aircraft with the civilian aircraft apparently lost with both souls on board. What kind of claims can arise from that? What would happen in terms of the investigation and the discovery, and then the potential claims, and then perhaps some of the potential defenses and some of the issues that we'll go through? Why would you like to?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the owner of the Air Force aircraft wreckage would be the lead safety investigator for the Air Force. And I'm sure some of you know this, maybe all of you know this, but all of these services will run two concurrent investigations. So it'll be a safety investigation, and that individual, the lead, certainly on the Navy and Marine Corps side, the lead safety investigator, the senior member of the aircraft mishap board, is in charge. And then there will be a concurrent JAGMAN or command investigation. That's the one. So the safety investigation is privileged. I'm sure we've all seen them, but you're probably not supposed to. But the command investigation is releasable for FOIA. It'll be redacted with sensitive information, but that's the releasable one. So the relationship between the command investigator and the safety investigator can be kind of interesting sometimes. Well, working toward the same goal-ish. But in this fact pattern, the senior safety investigator for the Air Force would own that wreckage, and until he or she decides that wreckage is going anywhere, the wreckage is not going anywhere. And that could lead to this field being closed for a significant amount of time at the field, backing up to the midair. Now, yeah, so that investigator has a heck of a job. So if it were me, so I would be looking at how did the midair occur, why did the aircraft defer, what happened when it got to the airport and shut it down, and oh, by the way, now we have to call in the black pajama wearing people to get all the sensitive information off that aircraft, or just move the aircraft in its entirety. Wouldn't be surprising to me if in that scenario there were a tent or some sort of screen put up around that airplane. Typically when they're burning, smoking holes, it's not that big a deal. Let's put the fire out. Let's get the petroleum, the hydraulic fluid, the other sensitive information or sensitive material. They're all epoxy and composite aircraft now, so that stuff starts burning. That's a bad thing. But yeah, the sensitive information on board the spy plane here would be something we would want to get rid of or get out of the way real fast. That's happening in China or Taiwan, right?
Right.
Or Hainan Island, I think, just south of China with P3 years ago. So that's from the military perspective.
I mean, from the plaintiff's perspective, what we face in these cases is essentially the lack of evidence, or the government is resisting producing evidence, and as a plaintiff, where you have the burden of proof, that's a real problem. The defendant can come in and say, look, we can't defend ourselves because state secrets. I mean, if I looked at the affirmative defenses that you worry about in cases involving the military, you got the government contract defense, which is always an issue. You've got the political question doctrine. You've got state secrets doctrine. If this was a different scenario and it was a combat zone, you have the combat activities exception, and you could actually have all of those defenses thrown at you at once. But the bottom line, the main concern you have is you can't get the information you need to prosecute the case, and that's a real problem for the plaintiff.
And do you think as part of the Air Force's AIB, the Air Force is also going to go out, because there was a collision midair, presumably some pieces of that aircraft came off there, and even cordon off where the civilian aircraft perhaps went down, to make sure there's no piece embedded?
Yeah, you would certainly take a look at that. I mean, the way it looked to me, but I would confirm this as a senior investigator, was that they clipped wings, and but yeah, I would want to go get eyes on that civilian aircraft wreckage to make sure that there wasn't, let's just say there's a sensor, there's some pod on the wingtip, and that's what came off. Well, if it's not with the civilian aircraft wreckage, and it's not on the Air Force, it's not on the Pilatus wreckage, where to go, and we want to go find that.
Time to do a fog walk.
It's a big fog walk, yeah, it's a 4-state fog walk. But that brings up a good point. So in Mississippi last summer, so that KC-130 went down on July 10th last year. I'd actually been activated 2 weeks before because we decided to burn up an F-18 at Miramar, and burn up 2 Marines pretty badly, unfortunately. So I'm on active duty orders doing this ground mishap investigation, and I come home from Miramar, and TV goes on, and I see this smoking hole of a KC-130 in a soybean field in Mississippi. I kind of did this, it's like I'm just waiting, turn the phone on loud, put it on my table, and not 20 minutes later, phone rings, and it's like, hey, it's like, yeah, when do I need to go? I'll be there tomorrow. So, in any case, we had, so that aircraft was carrying Marine Special Operations folks and all their toys. And a lot of their toys go boom and go bang. And so I show up to now my 6th aircraft accident investigation. I think I've done it a couple times. Don't know everything, but I've learned a few things. And the first person I see, first 2 people I see other than the Marines that I'm expecting to see are DEA and ATF. And I said, WTF, like what what are you doing here kind of thing? Well, things that go boom and bang get a lot of folks' attention. So much like this scenario where if there were sensitive parts of that RC-75 that we need to find in Mississippi last year, we spent a lot of time looking for serialized things that go bang and go boom. And then when they find them, they do things with them. So yeah, that's a big deal. We would certainly want to know where all that stuff is.
And then the plaintiffs' representatives, assuming there's some immediacy and some calls, would love to secure wreckage for future expert examination. We on the defense side also would love to, 30 plus years ago, let's just say, we even at Piper had go teams that would go out and find wreckage if we heard about a crash with one of our aircraft and would secure it and get it stored. Can't do this in this case. The Air Force has got it, perhaps the civilian plane, but talk about trying to get it from the military after their investigation.
I mean, two things. I talked about, when I was at ASL getting letters from lawyers. The military doesn't doesn't really care so much about preserving wreckage for the use in future potential litigation. I mean, I could tell you stories. Like I went to a wreckage inspection after like 6 months of setting it up, and it was a Little Bird case, and we got to the wreckage, and my expert started in. Actually, I spotted it too, but it was a Huey wreckage. So after months of setting up this inspection, they gave us the wrong helicopter wreckage. I'm like, wow, that's a huge landing gear for a Little Bird. It's like, yeah, it's a Huey landing gear. But also they'll reuse the wreckage they were using the wreckage to do evacuation drills, like the emergency drills. So after the accident, the wreckage had been used 150 times to put people in, pull them out, and so it's not only hard to get to the wreckage, but the condition of the wreckage and pieces of the wreckage may be lost. In the case I had, the wreckage was actually recovered from a combat zone, but they didn't recover the whole wreckage. And if the pieces that we needed for the case were actually in a field in Iraq, and my associate refused to go to Iraq to get them. So if anyone wants a job at the firm,
even in the U.S., we've got one. I can't go into great detail because it's still in litigation, but the crash occurred in water, 200 feet deep. The military didn't really want to go after it. They thought they already knew what happened. The family essentially forced the military to go after it by writing letters to the general who was in charge of the AIB. The general finally contacted the Navy, which sent boats out, and they pulled part of it, not the key parts. Then they didn't rinse, they didn't do anything to preserve. They stuck it in a rundown X-alert hangar, which all military guys will know what those are. Essentially a rusted through holes in the ceiling. Every time it rains, it gets wet again. And they just scattered it out in there, and that's where they left it stored for 2 years. By the time the FOIA request and the TUI request were made to see it jointly in the litigation, how much value can you get from that? So all the experts are starting with a disadvantage sometimes in these kind of cases. Talk about just getting the access to get to see it when it's a military involved aircraft that you want to go see it at a base or a school facility.
Well, it's you know, what you really need to do is get a really good contact, and there are some government lawyers working for the Army or the Navy who will actually help with that process. And once you get that right person, like I was the wrong person when I was the ASO at the squadron. They would write me, and I would actually do research. And one of the things you have to understand, if we had a squadron, the crash was 5 years before, and not a single person who was in the squadron 5 years before was in the squadron at the time. And all the wreckage was gone, but all the records for the helicopter were sent somewhere that I had no idea. So I had nobody to talk to. We had no records, and I did some research, and I said, no, this is the outfit, and it's a headquarters Marine Corps. Call headquarters Marine Corps, and the guys wrote me back and said, you know, that's really true, but they told me to call you. So that was like, that's what you get a lot in the military, is you get one unit, they go, hey, call these guys, and they go, and you call them, and they go call the people that told you to call me. But the key is to get a good, you know, FOIA lawyer, and that person will really help.
Yeah, we had an Apache, I wouldn't call it crash. The aircraft was on the deck, they were taxiing, they actually, it stops taxiing, set the parking brake, reduce the collective, which I guess in helicopter world means there's more power to the blades or there's zero pitch. I don't know, helicopter. Everybody know why helicopters fly, by the way? Does everyone understand the concept of how helicopters fly?
They don't fly.
Well, they are so repulsive that the Earth's gravitational force pushes them away from the ground, which is how they do that. So, and it was a guard, it was a South Carolina National Guard helicopter, so they lowered the collective, set the parking brake, reduced the collective, zero pitch in the blades, and the rotor mast went forward as the blades were still spinning, and so it killed the guy in the front cockpit, and then for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, so those blades...
It sounds like a maintenance issue. There's a contractor involved.
Well, it's interesting. Well, that was the manufacturer of the aircraft, so the piece that we alleged failed, we settled that case about a month before trial, was a what we call a greater than service life expectancy piece. It was a cast piece of metal, a mast-based support assembly that's half the size of this table, and with the Apache crashes over in Iraq and Afghanistan and a couple of shoot downs, every time they discovered a wreckage, the mast-based support assembly was intact, even if the Apache were in thousands of pieces. And this one had a big crack in the middle, so yeah, something was wrong with that piece of metal. So we get word about this case, we signed compliance, we got to McIntyre National Guard Base to interview and then ultimately depose some folks, but getting the aircraft itself was, shall we say, an exercise in futility, because now you get the dual standard of the Guard and the Army. So it's an Army asset, but it belongs to a Guard unit, and so we had months and months in the TUI process of the Guard saying, talk to the Army, and the Army saying, talk to the Guard. Like, okay, this is not good. And, you know, had been in the Marine Corps for a couple of years at the time, like, okay, I know you're all lying. I know none of you is telling me the truth right now, but some JAG who's on his way out of that billet because he's getting restationed doesn't want to deal with this, doesn't want to deal with the plaintiff's lawyers. And so that case, obviously, it was as a plaintiff's lawyer, I wasn't involved in the investigation. But the outgoing SJA doesn't want anything to do with us, and the incoming guy is a deer in the headlights and has no clue. So I would say it took us a year to finally get access to that wreckage through repeated TUIs. Going back to the judge, and now you're dealing with a federal judge who's, again, giving you Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Like, why are we waiting? Let's go, kids. We need to get this case going. Like, judge is the Army. Sorry, we can't help you.
You really have to let the judge know what you're dealing with, because it could be a year before you have access to a wreckage. Judge, like you just said it, judges hard for them to believe it. And roping, letting the judge know about the process, the 2E process, and what you're going through. And actually, the defendants are usually pretty helpful, because they're facing the same problem, that everyone wants access to the wreckage, and it's really, the military is really good at doing what they do. They're really bad about supporting litigation.
That's true. In fact, in our pending case, most of our motions have been joint with plaintiff's counsel in terms of either extending deadlines. We've even made joint TUI requests, which, if you're doing defense on a case that involves any military asset, try to work with your opposing counsel. They want the same information. In ours, we were trying to get 2 parts out of these thousands of pieces to be sent, to be examined, and then scanned. The Air Force says, no, do it here. Well, you don't have the scanning equipment. You don't have any engineers even on this base. It's in a Quonset hut, essentially, at the end of the field. Even if we could ship one in by truck, we can't do it. We'll ship it. And the Air Force's answer was no. So you've got to go in front of the federal judge and then explain to him what you want to do and how it's preserving it. And how, even though the Air Force is now going to throw that piece away, they still claim it's proprietary, it's ITAR controlled, it's top secret, even though we sell it to every country out there in the world, and you can buy the books online, we're not giving it. So if you can jointly explain all that to the judge and stand together, you have a better chance.
Right.
And let's take that, I'm sorry.
No, it's just funny. We were talking about this before, but one of the things you have to understand is it's hard to make a call if you're in the military. Like, it's hard to say, I'm going to let this piece leave the base, because you're not going to get in trouble for refusing to do it. Right. But if you let it leave the base, and then some higher up that has a problem with that, that's the end of your career.
Yeah, let's assume for the sake of argument. Yeah, let's assume for the sake of argument that the investigation is over, and hopefully there would have been some coordination between the senior member of the safety investigation, the senior member of the JAG or command investigation, and through those 2 individuals would have said to the to the general or whoever, hey, we're done, and now that there's pending litigation, or we would have known that there's pending litigation, that wreckage can stay wherever it is, because now we know that. The odds of the senior investigator also being a plaintiff's aviation lawyer, not really very high. I think there's one other guy that does this. But if I were still investigating that and knew that there was litigation pending, like, so for instance, we put that F-18 into the house in San Diego back in 2008. Let's be real, everyone knew lawsuit was coming. And after we published that report, in which the Marine Corps took it on the chin, deservedly so, there was absolutely no one at fault for that airplane going into the house and killing 4 people, 3 generations, an infant, a toddler, their mother, and her mother. Guy leaves for work at 8 o'clock in the morning, kisses his wife, 2 kids, and mother-in-law goodbye, and comes back after after a day's work, and there's no house and no 4 people. It's absolutely horrible. And we as Marine Corps messed that up midway till Sunday. And some of you may have seen me give that presentation. I've done it once or twice about how we did badly there. So it's interesting, in that case, the wreckage was less relevant to the litigation because it was the process, right? How did we institutionally screw that up so badly that that airplane went into this house? There was no product defect, the motors didn't fail, there was no alleged issue. There's no ATC issue, right? So we didn't really need the aircraft. We just needed to know what happened, and we found out what happened. In a case like this, or the KC-130 case, or a crash from last summer, there are a lot of pieces that could have. How does a perfectly good KC-130 come apart at 20,000 feet flying 270? Don't know. Well, actually, essentially, I kind of do know, but would say, but there are a lot of pieces there that we need. So like Justin said, if I were the senior investigator and somebody let that airplane go away from that hangar before I was done, I would not be super thrilled about that.
Right. Putting the record aside, the next question is what you're going to get in terms of testimony. So in this fact scenario, we get the people from the squadron, and you say, okay, what was was the mission that they were on before the mid-air collision, and they say, we can't tell you that.
Yeah, objection, don't answer that from the JAG attorney.
And
He's sitting there with the witnesses.
Yeah, and then from the plaintiff's perspective, you know, the facts are pretty clear that, you know, mid-air collision can't really be part of some top secret. Like, the mistakes that led to the mid-air collision probably are not part of some top secret issue, but the defendant probably has a right to find out what the mission was, why were they flying at that altitude, why were they climbing, what was going on. And if the military refuses to let their witnesses answer that, now we have a problem. I mentioned the many defenses that can come up in the cases. The state secret issue. Can the defendant's product or defendant's conduct, if it can't delve into what the military was doing, why they were doing it. So that's what we're concerned about.
And we're assuming for this fact scenario that the targeted defendant is not going to be the government, the Air Force in this case. It's actually going to be either Pilatus or maybe avionics failed or maybe maintenance, which in our scenario is being done by a contractor at the base, operating as a military maintenance squadron, but a private contractor, which can be sued. And as Justin was saying, on the defense side, I want to know. But you'll find out if you begin to ask questions to these witnesses, and the first problem you have is the JAG officers have sent you a list and said you can ask in this area, this box only. No opinions, no testimony outside this box, no turning them into a quasi-expert, no matter how much expertise they have. And you'll get situations where you have to ask 20 questions to get what could be answered with one simple one. You know, such as, what do you call this thing that flies the airplane? Stick. Well, before they'll answer that, you'll get the objection, calls for an opinion. What? No, just lay on predicate. So you're walking through instead of a picture of the cockpit. What is this? How do you control this? What do you use? Oh, that thing called a side stick controller. Do you colloquially refer to that as a stick? Yes. Same answer 10 minutes later. But you run into those problems when you're dealing with it. And what other problems do we run into with those? Testimony and the officers and follow up.
I had a case involving a crash in Iraq, and it was a squadron that did special operations and supported special operations. And I remember preparing my client who survived for his deposition, and I said, okay, so tell me what you were doing on the mission. And he's like, I can't tell you that. and we were trying to work around what he could testify to, and ultimately, after a lot of work, this is actually his deposition. So the defense lawyer, and I had to pretend like I wasn't concerned at all. I was like, no. So his testimony was, we were supporting our client. Who is your client? I can't tell you that. And what was your client doing? He ultimately testified, our client wanted to talk to a guy. And that was all the testimony about what they were doing. So we were supporting a client who wanted to talk to a guy. And I think between, like, I figured out they were supporting special guys, CIA or Delta Force, and they were grabbing a guy. But it was really concerning because the defendants obviously wanted to make that as they couldn't defend themselves because they couldn't explore what the mission was that the crash occurred on. Ultimately, the judge, we were saying it doesn't matter. The crash occurred because of this problem with the airplane, not because of the mission. So the fact that they couldn't say what the mission was didn't matter. And that's what I still was nervous, but you would never have known it by seeing. I was cool as a cucumber at the deposition.
Obviously. The contractor thing brings up another interesting nuance, and that is when, like Mike said, when maintenance is done, if now sometimes at the squadron level, we call it the organizational level, but even at the intermediate level and at the advanced depot level. So when aircraft, certainly older aircraft, and I don't know, let's use a 50-year-old KC-130 for example, gets reworked a couple of times in its lifetime. Well, what you find out at the intermediate and the depot level maintenance facilities is a lot of that's not done by the government itself, it's done by contractors, and Now, inevitably, you're gonna run into the government contractor defense, so you really have to drill down into what was requested by the government, and then what was performed, because I'm sure most of you know that the contractor defense, so if the government said, we want you to build this box and make it 3 inches by 3 inches, and this big and this heavy, and that's what the contractor did, probably out of luck, whereas if they say, hey, build me a watch and tell me when it's done, and you show them a couple watches, the defense might not be available. I'm saying it won't be, but it might not be available. So it depends on the level of control the government had. Well, in a couple of cases, in fact, Justin and I shared this case a few years ago with a Huey that went down in Southern California. Turns out that some depot level maintenance was done on the vertical fin of a Huey, and it just snapped. And again, going back to my lack of helicopter expertise, apparently tail rudder is a pretty important thing. So you kind of want that thing on the helicopter. 2 of the crew members died and 2 survived. We had the survivors. You guys have the decedents, right? We ended up in Corpus Christi, Texas, talking to some folks about what they had done maintenance-wise, and as it turned out, my recollection is that they decided it was the oversized rivet holes, right? And that was a decision that they made there. Not the government didn't say drill the holes this big. The contractor was like, yeah, well, I guess that's the bit that's on the drill today, so we're just going to kind of do this now. Right? So I guess my takeaway is don't give up necessarily when you realize that you're probably Fury's barred if you have service members for clients, probably Fury's barred from suing the government. Not probably, you are Fury's barred from suing the government, but you might have a contractor, so don't necessarily give up from the plaintiff's perspective just because there's a contractor and you might have the contractor defense.
And on the defense side, don't give up, because if you can show that the contractor followed strictly what they were given, as Brian was saying, if they, in case of an Air Force, if they've been required under their contract to follow Air Force TOs and TCTOs, which is technical orders and time compliance technical orders, and Air Force manuals and ops, and they don't have any discretion in how they do the maintenance, except whether they use a blue handled or a red handled Phillips screwdriver to put the screw in, then you may have a government contractor defense. And so when you have these kind of cases, you need someone who's experienced in that, who then knows what questions to ask. And on the family side, you need a plaintiff attorney who knows how to defend that defense, to drill down to see if they can thwart it. In our case, in our fact scenario, we're obviously going to raise that issue at some point. Now, one of the problems we're also going to run into is usually the military will not only come and take the wreckage. As part of the AIB and the SIB, they will immediately also cut off that aircraft's maintenance records, and they will take them. They will even disconnect the contractor from the system for that aircraft. So hopefully you've got seasoned plaintiffs attorneys like these who don't call me and say, we need the maintenance record. My answer is going to be, I don't have it, but you're the contractor. I don't have it. They're the Air Force property, and get them from the Air Force. In fact, they both
we'll probably still call you.
And then you're going to call somebody who's going to call me. It's now back to put my military investigator hat on. He's going to call me and say, hey, we're getting a request for X, Y, and Z, and they can. First of all, if I were to get that as the JAG investigator, command investigator, I'm going to go to the senior member of the aircraft mishap board again, who really is in charge or owns the aircraft. The 2 investigations are separate, but can't do anything with the aircraft or its records. Or the experts or their folks. So let's go back to our fact pattern here. The Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps have at the depot level maintenance facilities, and they have those contractors going to come out to the crash site too. So it's not just knucklehead Marines and Air Force folks out there at the crash site. The contractor, GSs probably, who work for the depots, are going to come out and see what they need, and they're going to help you. In this case, it wasn't catastrophically destroyed, but the KC-130 instance where we had an 8 by 3 mile wreckage pattern, and that thing was put back together in a hangar or some big old warehouse in Greenwood, Mississippi, and the folks from Cherry Point were out there. Is that the widget from the number 2 engine and number 3 engine? And they figure this stuff out, and you just kind of sit there and watch them put this thing back together. What becomes interesting on our side, because the safety investigator can't be deposed, but if you're gonna take a deposition in that case, the only person you're gonna get a bite at is me. And I'm gonna have a staff judge advocate sitting next to me who, like Mike said, is gonna say, you get to speak within this very, very narrow framework. You can't ask me for my opinions, you can ask me for what I saw. But I'm not gonna share with you what I discussed with the contractors or the GSs, the folks from Cherry Point. And that gets further interesting because the safety officer is gonna be there if I'm talking to those guys anyway, because he wants to know what I'm asking him. And I can't ask that person from Cherry Point what he or she discussed with the safety investigator. It's very, very weird. The two investigations run concurrently. There's a little bit of overlap, so you're allowed to share factual information like the logbooks, the weather data, the air traffic control tapes and radar tapes and things. And you can share witnesses, but they don't have to give you the same statements because their statements to the safety investigation are privileged. You as a litigator will never see, should never see. The ones that give to me are discoverable.
It's actually, when we did investigations, as the ASO, I did witness interviews, and the JAG also did witness interviews, and we'd go together, and I would go in and question the witness for an hour, and then I would leave, and then the JAG would go in and question the same witness. And the idea was, hopefully, if the person wanted to say something to me that could potentially get them in legal trouble, but for the safety investigation, they wanted to disclose it, I would get that, whereas the same person may not be disclosed to the JAG, but the witnesses could never understand why they had to be interviewed twice.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And typically what happens, and again, I've recommended 6 of them, and specifically not the KC-130 issue, but the F-18 we burned up on the deck at Miramar, clearly maintenance issue, maintenance crew that decided to perform the maintenance that they did, circumvented, I don't know, about 500 procedures, and that's why these 2 Marines are burned up. And so the safety investigator did his witness interviews, and I show up, and I wish I were kidding. I sit them down, and sir, I'm taking the 5th. What? Corporal, no you're not. No, you're absolutely not. Sit right there, hold on a second, go get the sergeant major. What you talking about? Well, word got out, because like Justin said, there's a lot of confusion if you're not in a position to have done both a safety investigation and a command investigation, or at least be aware of them. You're Corporal Bag of Donuts, and Lieutenant Colonel Knucklehead is sitting in front of you about to ask you a question, and other Lieutenant Colonel Knucklehead has already asked you a bunch of questions. The word on the street was, I was there to determine if there were criminal charges to be levied. I'm like, okay, wow, this is no bueno. It's tangential, but it's also important because you could run into this if you had an issue where there were some maintenance problems and you wanted to know what the actual maintainers knew or did. About 12 layers of military bureaucracy you have to go through to get that. But as a litigator, if you were afforded the opportunity to speak to that individual, and you likely would be if he or she were real relevant, again, the JAG sitting next to him, realize you're going to have a very, very scared, intimidated young service member who really doesn't want to talk to you. And what's he or she going to tell you? Probably not a lot. And it took, in an hour of my interview, if Justin had done one for an hour as a safety investigator, a good 55 minutes of mine is like, seriously, Corporal, I'm not here to put you in jail. Like, I'm not. I just need to know. I don't want to know what you told, Lieutenant Colonel Green. I want to know what happened. And if it's the same thing, that's fine. But and they don't get it, and it's unfortunate because they have a lot of relevant information. If, like we said, if this case were to move on to litigation, it obviously won't. You want to know what those 6 maintainers were doing out on the flight line at 10:30 at night with the lights on, and how all of a sudden 2 of them came out the bottom of an airplane on fire.
And the safety investigator does a whole spiel about how everything that he or she is asking is not going to be used against them. So it kind of sets up the JAG investigator to be the bad guy.
Right. And the reason, the purpose is because the military is doing it to track investigation for two different purposes. And the one is to really drill down to see, do we have a problem here that we need to address? Do we have a fleet line problem, perhaps, that we need to address? Do we have a maintenance problem? And so the immunity is given, and there's no repercussions purportedly from one side of it, so that you get the very honest, drilled down answers. Now, on the litigation end, we don't get to see those. We have to essentially recreate what we believe to be either a plaintiff's theory or a defense theory of the case through our own experts, and we can't use any of the experts the military use. Caveat a little bit of it. For example, if Lockheed sent somebody out as representative and Lockheed issued a report that's factual or downloaded the crash survivable memory unit data, you can then take that out and you might use that. But the opinions of the AIV, which you will get, the investigation on the safety side, are not admissible by statute. You might get some of the factual parts in. So you need these seasoned guys on both sides to work through those issues and to deal with the witnesses. And then throw another wrinkle in. If you've got a contractor, you're probably going to have a union to deal with. So I try to also tell my opposing counsel right up front, hey, I'm going to do the best I can to get those witnesses you want from my contractor, but give me a little slack. I'll even join with you in a motion to extend time if we need to, because I got to deal with a union rep. Because by contract, these guys also have rights under their union. And so I'm dealing with multiple levels also on the defense side. That throws some unique issues into it. So long time of investigation on these, and these guys are faced with short time frames in some states, a year or two on the death case.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee's a weird statute. You know, the NTSB, we talked a little bit yesterday about NTSB investigations. Sometimes the NTSB can take over 2 years. They'll release the wreckage well before 2 years, but military can just be as long, and there's less information that really is available during the course of the investigation. You know, I represent some military families now. There's an ongoing investigation, and it's been well over a year, and they have really no information from the military. And you know what they get is the investigation's proceeding. The report is not imminent. The report's imminent, and then a week later it's not imminent, and it's you know, there's a lot that goes on. Like I said before, the military is really, really good at what their mission is, and their mission is not to support litigation, and they're really terrible about that.
So when you guys get these cases, where do you prefer to bring them if you can? State, federal?
Well,
Depends on the state.
it depends on the state.
Might not have an option.
Yeah, and nowadays we're filing them everywhere. This isn't a panel on jurisdiction, but with the new Supreme Court rulings, filing protective actions everywhere, and we're ultimately, a lot of the military cases, the accidents occur either outside the U.S. or in a state that really has no interest in the accident. So we end up either filing in the home jurisdiction of the defendant, and then you can keep the case in state court. We may want to do that. State court judges, I think federal judges are maybe more apt, not to generalize, but all these defenses, you know, there's a state court judge may not feel like dismissing a case based on these defenses, where a federal judge may do it. So.
And true from the defense side, a state court judge may have never handled, say, a DOSHA case, Death of the High Seas Act. He probably shouldn't have. And a state court judge may never have addressed federal laws or immunity, government contractor defense. So on the defense side, we're always trying, if they were filed in state, to remove it.
Well, the federal officer removal is a real tool for you guys.
It is.
Yeah, because you know we'll file in the home state and try to prevent removal, but I think most judges will allow it on a government contractor, federal officer removal.
Small funny war story. I think I'm the only one who's had a email that said, "Thank you for not letting us be dismissed. I think, question mark, we had a case that we removed. We got the perfect federal judge for it, but we went ahead and answered immediately too. Plaintiffs realizing, oops, tried to dismiss to go file in another state where we also do business for our home." And I opposed it, with permission of the client ahead of time. The client said, I'd like being dismissed, but we're going to get sued again anyway, what the heck? And we fought it vigorously through several briefings, and the federal judge finally realized the forum shopping that was taking place and said, no, you're here if you want to be somewhere. And if you refile in the other state, they're just going to remove it. And that judge, I'm going to ask to send it back to me. So you're just going to stay here.
You know, I clerked for a very tough federal judge, and plaintiffs would file, and once they got the judge, dismiss and then refile to get another judge. But he figured that out, and he told the clerk, anyone who does that, reassign it to him. And so the poor person, the poor plaintiff's lawyer, like at the time I wasn't a plaintiff's lawyer, but now I feel bad for plaintiff's lawyers that do this. They file, get the judge they don't want, and then refile, and then the judge would immediately pull them in for a conference and chew them out for doing that. So,
What a way to start your case.
yeah, right.
I think we have a question.
I've had a number of these cases, and I agree with most of what you said. I mean, some cases, the investigator or the JAG is very, very helpful, sets up that position without ever having to do TUI, provides documents, other ones are waiting years. But doing a joint is really helpful. And also, it's very interesting representing the manufacturer, which I often do, to try to, it depends on the component part manufacturer or the helicopter manufacturer and their involvement, because they've been asked to come and do any analysis or investigation with the safety board and command investigation. So that sort of does a few things to privilege. One thing I've seen recently also is the political question doctrine, and that this was had to do with government funding, or the government was really responsible for the way that the aircraft was manufactured, or the way maintenance was even performed, or what maintenance was performed, and therefore it doesn't belong in the courts. I don't know if you've seen that be used.
There's a recent decision in Texas where the court said that evaluating the fault of the government was something the court could do, and dismissed based on that. That was a political question. It's a recent decision down in Texas. But yeah, that's a real concern. And all of these doctrines, political question. I mean, government contractors are really tough defense, but it's not a knockout defense in most cases. Where state secrets can be a knockout defense, like combat activities, a completely knockout defense. Yeah.
We hope to have a ruling in a similar case on those two defenses. We'll be raising shortly in the briefings, government contractor and political question both, and it's in a maintenance context. So
I
we'll see
want to
how it
follow
goes.
up question. This can apply to all of aviation. I find it's harder to find really good experts, because a lot of them are aging out, and particularly the military side, people who are familiar with military maintenance and things like that. Have you, from either side, been identifying new experts, or do you have the same issue with people that are trying to age out or overloaded because they're the only ones?
It depends what type of expert. Like getting military pilot experts is pretty easy. Getting military maintenance people is not that hard. But like our problem is design people. Getting on the plaintiff side, getting the good design expert, or even a good manufacturing expert. I imagine it's probably easier on the defense side to get those folks.
I wish I could say that. They are few and far between sometimes with the right experience in that airframe or system or subsystem. For example, if you've got a flight control issue and you really want to drill down into the flick of the computer on a fly-by-wire, there's not too many of those, and trying to get them on board can be difficult.
So, we have some that will consult with us, as long as you don't ever mention their name. So you can't, actually they're very helpful, but then you have this great expert, that unlike Bob Woodward, I can't name names, but you have this great expert who can help you with your case, but you can't use him or her at trial because they can't, for business reasons, disclose their names.
I just was wondering, in the fact pattern, would there be joint investigations, parallel investigations by the NTSB and the military? Would they work together, or would the NTSB be ousted? How would it work?
I don't think the NTSB gets involved.
Yeah, they certainly wouldn't get involved in the military side, and they're not going to, they would probably be tangentially involved because of the midair, and there would be some discussion between the command investigator and the NTSB about the midair. Now, I won't say fortunately, but the last couple midairs that I've investigated were military on military. So a couple Hornets, Huey and Cobra, and then unfortunately a Cobra and a Coast Guard KC-130. That was a nightmare for lots of reasons. But knock on wood, none of those involved civilian aircraft. My presumption is I would be speaking with the NTSB investigator certainly about some stuff related to the midair, and then he or she would probably want to see the wreckage, and then now you get back into what's classified and what's not on that aircraft. And sure, I'll cordon off everything and put the drapes over everything except for the left wingtip where you can see the event marks, the witness marks where that aircraft struck the caravan or whatever that was. But yeah, he's not going to get full unfettered access to that classified piece of.
Hey guys, so yeah, I'd like to get some follow-up on. So the NTSB is required to investigate civil military midairs.
Right.
So they do investigate those. A good example, there was a Cessna and an F-16 collision down in South Carolina a few years ago.
Okay.
The NTSB and the military both did investigations. The two agencies coordinated a fair amount. Military did its safety investigation first. That was on its own, but the NTSB and the JAG investigation run out of Andrews were pretty heavily coordinated. In fact, the military delayed publishing its report until the NTSB did its investigation.
Right, and that's a coordination thing, and that gets back to the personality thing and a not necessarily agency thing, but if you were the NTSB investigator and I were the Marine Corps Command investigator and we had a personal relationship, yes, and coordinating the release of the two reports, because you don't want one to come out before the other, and that would just be a nightmare, and because they're both public and whatnot. But yeah, but we wouldn't have to. We would have to do concurrent investigations, but the level of cooperation would be, if you come in, just being a total tool, like, yeah, no, I'll do my
The
thing.
NTSB and the military are both sort of aware of the sensitivities there.
Of course.
In my experience, there was a couple, one working with the Marine Corps and one working with the Air Force.
We were nice, right?
Yeah, both the NTSB and the military, work together pretty collaboratively, I would say, and shared evidence and information.
And of course, in our scenario, we kind of spiked it by having all of this highly classified, highly sensitive, highly modified aircraft. So you might have a lot more restrictions. He might, as he said, have you cordon off everything except as the NTSB tip, or even just here's the photos of the tip.
Occasionally, the NTSB, they do have people with clearances, and occasionally they have to get people read into things in order to.
And I'm glad you said that, because if this were an F-35, then that entire project is read-in, with the exception of the fact that it exists and flies, right? So other than that, it's a read-in. So if you're investigating that, yeah, what level of civilian authority you have in there, and does the military decide to read that investigator into certain parts of the program enough so that he or she can look at the part of the aircraft that they need to? There are probably SAPs on this aircraft, I would think, and you'd have to get that access. So that's a great point.
The military overclassifies. So.
Oh my God.
Coffee maker is, if it's on a top secret airplane,
It's
coffee maker is top secret. It makes secret coffee.
It's the same coffee maker on that aircraft that's on the DC-10, but it's secret.
Right, because makes
You
secret
can't
coffee.
see it, you can't drink its coffee.
Nope.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.